Before I begin and share the slides that I put together today, I'm often asked, having spent my entire life in the dietary supplement industry, why I joined Zinzino. And it comes down to three very simple things for me. Number one, efficacy. What works in the clinic? I've had a ringside seat to the dietary supplement industry starting in a health food store in 1988, and having traveled the world for Nordic Naturals as their spokesperson, I was able to put together the medical and scientific advisory team and work with them and educate people around the world about correcting the global omega-3 deficiency. So I'm very lucky that Zinzino happens to be a company built around my life's work. So first, it's what works in the clinic. Number two, it's the mission. And the mission for Zinzino is incredible. They are aiming to be the biggest company in the world in preventative nutrition and test-based nutrition. And then, of course, the people. And I'm going to share a little insight with some of the people behind the company. And I'll also show a case history, a tremendous case history before the end of the call. So I'm going to share my slides now. And I love how at Zinzino, we always talk about inspiring change in life. And that's what I hope we can do tonight. This is a slightly higher level talk, but I'll do my very, very best to communicate sort of to the middle of the class. But let's start here again with the mission, because this is the unified field theory that I think brings all of us together. Zinzino's aim is to become the biggest preventative health company in the world. And I've recently heard the founders say that within the next 10 years, we'll be talking to our AI medical assistants on our phones. And everything will be based on biomarkers. So I'm very excited to work with a company that really sees the end of celebrity endorsement and the end of influence. And everything is going to be based on your test numbers. They want to reinvent the nutritional space, and they're actually doing that and measurably move the dial on public health globally. And because of this extraordinary vision that they have, our team here in the States has been able to attract some of the top omega-3 scientists in the world to this crusade. So how do we get to this place where we are so far out of balance? If you look back at the omega-6, omega-3 ratio, even in the 1850s, it was balanced. For anybody that's new to this call, because I understand we do have some new people, I'll simplify it as best as I can. Imagine this is omega-6. It comes from seeds and nuts and grains and seed oils. It is an essential fatty acid. Your body doesn't make it. We have to get omega-6. It's pro-inflammatory, but omega-3, which we get from green leafy vegetables or fish that eat algae, omega-3 that's anti-inflammatory, they have to be in balance for optimal health. And most of us are so far out of balance. That's the problem that Zinzino is solving. The World Health Organization says 6.3 billion people globally are deficient in omega-3. So we're tackling one of the biggest health issues in the world. The average person in our country and in your country is testing around 25-1 omega-6 to omega-3. So too much pro-inflammatory omega-6 relative to the anti-inflammatory omega-3. And that's what we're correcting with the Health Protocol Premium and the Zinzino products. I talked to a gentleman yesterday that had a score of 160-1, who had the most strict vegan diet of any human being I had ever met. Our children are testing at 40-1 on average. So this is a huge problem that Zinzino is solving. So for the simplest explanation of what happens to us, what's going on in our cells, in our bodies, if we have 25 times more pro-inflammatory omega-6 relative to the anti-inflammatory omega-3. When we're that far out of balance, what is happening? Well, this is a brilliant slide, and it shows on the left-hand side, ultimately it ends up being, we have reduced cellular function. What does that mean? The cell membrane right there on the outside. That's where all these omega fatty acids live. There are about 100 different fatty acids in the cell membrane. When we are deficient in omega 3, that cell membrane is hard and rigid, mainly because it's loaded up with saturated fats, with cholesterol crystals. Omega 6 is shorter than omega 3. All of this negatively impacts cellular function. And we are only as healthy as our cells. We're made of 37 trillion cells, so they all have this lipid bilayer. If we're deficient in omega 3 and out of balance, like 99% of the world is, cell to cell signaling is reduced. Nutrients have a difficult time getting into the cell, and waste products have a difficult time getting out of the cell. So what we're saying is if we can get people back into balance, it supports healthy brain function. The brain is a supercomputer made out of fat. It affects hair quality, heart function, skin elasticity, inner organs, joints, and muscles. So what we're really doing is building a better body on a cellular level, because you see the cell membrane will self-assemble based on whatever fats are available. So if you're eating Pam and Spam and Ding Dongs and chicken nuggets and Hoes and Krispy Kremes, then it's going to make itself out of the fats that are available. The gentleman I spoke to the other day that got 160 to 1 has the most severe, restrictive, healthy diet of any person I've ever met. But he was using grapeseed oil, eating tons of almond butter, healthy foods like avocados. Nature, whatever you believe, put the omega 6s into the seeds and the grains and the seed oils, the omega 3s into the green leafy vegetables or the algae that the fish eat. So we were able to just quickly look at his diet, and it became clear here's a very, very, very healthy person who looks very, very good, that doesn't need any omega 3 at all. And as a result, is paying the price. So it's really the imbalance of these two healthy fats. My professor used to always say, omega 6 is not bad. Omega 6 is only toxic to the degree that it exceeds omega 3 in the tissue, which is the issue. And it's a little bit more of a sophisticated conversation to say to somebody, it's about the imbalance. And I think that's how we can appropriately communicate what we're talking about. So the lead author of a giant data set from the UK, I'll show you the paper here in a moment. The lead author of this paper, seminal paper, I believe, on the subject, said, we found that higher omega 6 to omega 3 ratio, which is what we test, is associated with a greater risk of dying. How do you think this person felt testing at 160 to 1? The good news is this is the most modifiable risk factor for disease, health, and longevity. The most modifiable risk factor. There's evidence that shows that correcting the omega 3 deficiency is equally as helpful as quitting smoking. This is a profound, simple solution that is going to impact the entire world. So here's the paper. It came out earlier last year. Higher ratio of plasma omega 6 to omega 3 fatty acids is associated with a greater risk of all-cause cancer and cardiovascular mortality, a population-based cohort study in UK Biobank. This is such a powerful data set. I like big data. My teacher said, we want real big data to make these arguments. Look at this conclusion. Using a population-based cohort in the UK Biobank, 85,425. Our study revealed a strong association between the ratio of circulating omega 6 to omega 3 and the risk of all-cause cancer and CVD mortality. This means that we are dealing with the biggest thing that we can possibly touch right now to help people around the world. So, how do you know what your omega 6-3 ratio is if you are not testing? Here in the States, I've talked to a lot of people that say, I'm totally convinced that I'm going to pass this test, including myself. And I'll show you a woman later as a case history. We were a little smug. I took this test 18 years ago. I gave these tests out to executives at Whole Foods, GNC, and Vitamin Shop. They never took the test, or rarely ever took the test. And we certainly didn't have the vision to tell people we're going to test you in 120 days to get a before and after. So I want to introduce you to some of the people. I said that was another part of the criteria. The people behind this company are remarkable. Our scientific and medical advisory board is world class, and that also helped us here in the States really attract some incredible experts. We have our own patented products, our own manufacturing and R&D. I've been there to Fawn, the contract manufacturing facility. I wanted to see it myself. I went to the third-party independent laboratory, and I've met the founders of the company. I will strongly encourage you, if you're not already familiar with Professor Dr. Paul Clayton from Cambridge, who then went on to study at Oxford with Sir Michael Crawford, PhD, who's considered the godfather of DHA. His book, The Driving Force, might be one of the best books ever written on nutrition, in my opinion. And this entire concept of test, take, and test comes from Ola Edie. He's the one that creates a great omega-3 scientist that had this vision that we could improve everything about omega-3. I mean, he really made this entire concept more efficient by test, take, and test. And he's the scientist that came up with the idea that with commercial fish oil, which most of us are familiar with, when you strip out all of the mercury, you also rip out all of the polyphenol antioxidants. These polyphenol antioxidants are in the food web, they're in the algae. They're on the outside of the fatty acids. So just try to imagine you've got these antioxidant polyphenols on the outside, and the fatty acids are in the middle in the algae. So the plankton eat the algae, the small fish eat the plankton, the whales ate the small fish, and the Inuit ate the whale blubber. So he made the observation that these polyphenols help to chaperone the omega-3s through the trophic levels of the fish and increase the secondary bioavailability. And this is a code that Zinzino has cracked, which is just brilliant. Dr. Angela Rizzo from the University of Milan should probably get the credit for developing this blood spot test. There were several different groups working on it at exactly the same time, but a true visionary, and we're very honored to have her part of the team. Dr. Abraham from Nestle, Dr. Natalie Cather, who's a board-certified medical doctor who's worked in the pharma world and the dietary supplement space, and Stephen Chernisky, who's a scientist who opened up the FDA's first laboratory for plant-based medicine. So as a team and as a group, the company is very, very sophisticated. So I'm often asked, you might be asked too, about the independence of this third-party test. I will encourage you to look up Vitas Analytical Services. I had the great privilege of visiting. They test about 6,000 samples a day. The facility is beautiful. It's so clean. And it's really got the biggest database of omega-6-3 blood spot tests in the world. It's pretty remarkable. And if you look at who they work with, Harvard University, University of Cambridge, King's College London, the Max Planck Institute. And I asked when I was there, Professor Thomas Gunderson, why Zinzino? And he looked me right in the face and he said, because Zinzino effects change. They're taking this very important information and they're getting it directly to the people. They affect change. And I've heard recently that this data set that we have of 1.5 million blood spot tests and growing, that they're going to be publishing this data soon. This is what was so revelatory. 99% of the samples that come into Vitas Analytics, those results, people get more than 3 to 1. They fail the test. 99% of the samples that come in, people fail the test. These are people that take fish oil or copious fish eaters. And it's been often said we have to do randomized control trials because we cannot test the world. Well, Zenzino is testing the world, and they're able to demonstrate for people that take omega-3 and or eat fish, once they go on to the balance concept and start taking the balance oil with the health protocol premium in many cases, that equally as many people that fail the test either improve dramatically or pass. So here's a new paper that came out in Progress in Lipid Research at the end of last year. This is the omega-3 World Map 2024 update. Just to illustrate how big of an issue this is, these are some of the top omega-3 scientists in the space. And just take a look at this map and look at your country, look at my country, look at countries around the world. Wherever you see it red, those are people that have far too little omega-3 in their red blood cells. And when you see the countries that are green in those coastal areas where people do eat enough fish, those people are lucky to get the adequate protection. But most people in the developed world are failing this test. So this is something that we've known for a while. This isn't news. It's just finally making its way to the mainstream. This is a very important paper that was published in the Journal of Clinical Psychiatry in 2011. The lead author, Colonel Dr. Michael Lewis, MD, West Point grad, Army Ranger, infectious disease hunter. He discovered SARS the first time. Master's in Public Health that also has an MBA, is a Zenzino partner. And he published this paper along with Captain Joseph R. Hiblin. These are both uniformed officers in the Surgeon General's Army. It's an interesting story. One day they were out having a beer, and the psychiatrist, Captain Hiblin, said to Colonel Michael Lewis, "Why are we losing so many soldiers to suicide? We're losing more soldiers to suicide than we are in the theater of war at this particular time in 2011. So Colonel Lewis said to Captain Joe Hiblin, "The Army has a repository of blood, and we can go back and test the blood of these soldiers that had committed suicide." So they had 800 samples, and then they got 800 matched controls by rank and age. Again, this is correlation, not causation, but it's a very powerful study. They found that among men, risk of suicide was 62% greater in the lowest quartile of omega-3 status. And we now should really pay attention to this. So here is a picture of Colonel Michael Lewis and his very powerful book. If you're not familiar with his work, I always encourage people, this book should be in your library, When Brains Collide. He's considered probably the foremost expert in the world on traumatic brain injury and concussion and omega-3. And he's also the founder of the Brain Health Education and Research Institute. So if you're interested in following sort of the concussion omega-3 conversation, you could join his mailing list at right there. Take a little picture, BHERI, Brain Health Education Research Institute.org, and you can get updates from Colonel Lewis. This is a paper that came out last year in the journal Aggressive and Violent Behavior. The title is Omega-3 Supplementation Reduces Aggressive Behavior, a meta-analytic review of randomized control trials. And it is very powerful what it says. It is concluded that there is now significant evidence to begin to implement omega-3 supplementation to reduce aggression in children and adults, irrespective of whether the setting is in the community, the clinic, or the criminal justice system. There are studies that were done years past where they looked at violent offenders and gave them micronutrients like we get in the Extend product and omega-3, showing a dramatic reduction in recidivism rate in violent prisoners. The highlights of the study, a meta-analysis. So that's a study of the study. So in the hierarchy of medicine, this is a big deal. It was conducted on 28 randomized control trials involving 3,918 participants. And the takeaway is very simple. You do not need to be a lipidologist or an expert in the subject to understand this. Omega-3 is a safe, cheap, and healthy intervention to reduce aggression. So worldwide, I think we can all agree that it would behoove us to get into balance. This is a paper that was published last year in the seminal journal on the subject, prostaglandins, leukotrienes, and essential fatty acids. It's called PLEFA. If there was one journal to really follow the big omega-3 story, this would be it. And it says EPA and DHA status among people living in the United States from 2000 to 2023. And this is a great takeaway statement. If there's one thing to remember today on the science side, it's this. Omega-3 blood status, that's what we're measuring and what we're correcting with our test and our balance oil, is a modifiable risk factor for many diseases. Hard stop for all the doctors on the call. A modifiable risk factor for many diseases. Public health officials should take steps to emphasize the significance of omega-3 in preserving the health of the US population, and I might add, the world. So let's make it clear that our balance oil is not just omega-3 fish oil. It's much more. In fact, it's all about the polyphenols that were originally in the algae where the omega-3 comes from. Those polyphenols are inadvertently stripped out when we remove the mercury, PCBs, dioxins, fire retardants, and microplastics. You have to do that. So as you take out the bad stuff, you take out the good stuff. The polyphenols are chaperones. Again, they wrap around the omega-3, protect them, bring them through the trophic levels of the fish, and in us, the polyphenols increase the secondary bioavailability. How can we make that statement? 1.5 million people fail the test that are taking fish oil, commercial fish oil, cod liver oil, krill oil, flaxseed oil, green lip mussel oil, or eating fish. They go on the balance oil for 120 days, and 99% of the people improve dramatically or pass. So I call this a Mediterranean diet in a bottle. Our chief science officer called it an Inuit diet in a bottle. I said, I agree with you, sir, but people may not know what that means. Every bottle is equal to 300 olives. So it's 60% pure, high-grade, triglyceride form fish oil from small, sustainably caught wild fish, primarily anchovies and sardines that are sourced off the coast of Peru, the largest fishery in the world because of the Humboldt Current. And they're small fish, they're pelagic fish, they're not in the ocean long enough to absorb too many toxins, although they're all removed. And then Ola Edie discovered the idea that olives, not average olives, not the kind of olives that you normally use to make olive oil, but premature olives, little baby olives that are kind of the size of coffee beans, have the highest amount of these polyphenols. And they are land-based terrestrial analogs for the marine web fluorotannins that get stripped out. And he came up with this idea that by combining the polyphenolic rich olive oil with the omega-3, that he could increase not only the stability of the oil in the bottle, but increase the stability of the oil in your body, which I will demonstrate. So what makes Zinzino Balance Oil different? When it comes to the fish oil part, it's what we call 2010 EPA and DHA. So it has many of the other omega fatty acids in there. It isn't just super concentrated EPA and DHA, it's more of a full spectrum oil. So when you look at the oil itself, the fish oil component, you get EPA, DHA, DPA, and you get omega-7. So when you look at it through a GC mass spec, you see all of these little peaks and valleys. It's full spectrum fish oil, if you will. And then combining it with the polyphenolic rich olive oil, that's what makes it so unique. So here's a paper to support the combination of olive oil with omega-3. This is the Journal of the American Medical Association Open Network last year. Consumption of olive oil and diet quality and risk of dementia-related death. And in 92,383 adults observed over 28 years, the consumption of more than 7 grams a day of olive oil was associated with a 28% lower risk of dementia-related death compared with never or rarely consuming olive oil, irrespective of diet quality. So when you look at a bottle of fish oil, any omega-3 that you've taken, you're going to see vitamin E. You're going to see rosemary. I've never seen olive oil combined with omega-3. And so this is a perfect illustration here of why we want this to be the carrier oil. And then I'm often asked, well, where's the evidence on combining the polyphenols and the omega-3? This is a great paper that came out in Molecules a couple of years back. It's got a long text box here, so I'll only read part of it. It has been reported that the combination, as in the balance oil, of these nutraceuticals can lead to a 3-fold increase in glutathione peroxidase activity. That's the enzyme that makes our body's master antioxidant. Standard fish oil may be depleting your body's glutathione, where balance oil appears to increase the glutathione peroxidase activity, as well as a 50 to 200% attenuation of common inflammation biomarkers as compared to their individual capacities. The adequate combination of these bioactive food compounds should offer a powerful tool for the design of nutritional interventions for the prevention and palliation of a plethora of human metabolic diseases, frequently diet-induced, whose etiology and progression are characterized by redox homeostasis disturbances and low grade of chronic inflammation. There is more. When you take the balance oil and you compare it to cod liver oil, to concentrated fish oil and krill oil, and what we call the oil stability index. This is where we take the oil, we put a tube with oxygen, and then crank up the heat to see how stable the oil is. And you see the balance oil, because of the monounsaturated omega-9 and the polyphenols from the olives, is the most stable in the bottle and in the body in comparison to cod liver oil, concentrated fish oil, or krill oil with astaxanthin, which under these conditions just falls apart. This is a wonderful publication that came out in 2001 that again makes the argument for the synergy between these two, the fish oil and the olive oil. Sustainably sourced olive polyphenols and omega-3 marine lipids, a synergy fostering public health. This is powerful consensual validation that what Zinzino is doing, what we are doing, is on the cutting edge of nutrition and prevention. Natural polyphenols present in marine oils play an essential role in protecting omega-3 lipids from oxidation and autooxidation, ensuring that no pro-inflammatory products are formed after intake, as often happens with refined omega-3 concentrates. Yes, that might be the reason why commercial fish oil is not delivering on the promise. Balance oil is delivering on the promise because of the combination, and the synergy here should not be missed. This is another powerful paper from Frontiers in Nutrition, Polyphenols and Omega-3's Beneficial Outcomes to Obesity and its Related Metabolic Disease. The conclusion: the consumption of vegetables, fruits, and seeds, and fish and or supplements rich in polyphenols and omega-3 is widely correlated with reducing of obesity. And we all know what we're up against with the processed food. What I love about the Zinzino concept is we've been finding that if you test and take the oil as recommended based on body weight, which I've never seen before, that it is not as imperative to change the background diet. That will help us get to millions and millions of people with a 1-second solution. So as we're getting closer here to wrapping it up, I would strongly encourage you to follow this blog from Professor Paul Clayton, our Chief Science Officer. This is a great title of one of his posts and also the title of one of his papers, From Algae to Omega. And he's a tremendous contribution to the field of nutrition, nutritional medicine, and I'm just so honored that we get to work with Professor Clayton. So here's some of his original research on the balance oil. This was published in Sports Medicine, Fish Oil, Polyphenols, and Physical Performance. And so they took football, soccer players and put them on the balance oil and some of the other Zinzino products. By the end of the intervention period, we were able to reduce the player's average omega-6-3 ratio from 12.5 to 3.5. Rates of absenteeism due to infection and injury were reduced by 85 and 57% respectively, contributing to improved performance, morale, and position in the league. So Zinzino is really onto something. So here's a case history that I want to share with you. A 63-year-old woman who is one of the healthiest people I have ever met, so disciplined, was taking plant-based omega-3s and other omega-3 products, exercises regularly, has modified every other risk factor, was a strength trainer, has competed in the Eco Challenge race, the hardest race on earth. And she was convinced that she would ace this test. And she got a 23-1. It was a tough day for her. Her omega-3 index was 3.1. And after only 120 days on the Zinzino Health Protocol Premium, she aced her results. I'll show you her results in a moment. But the simplicity and the elegance of this protocol, one for the cells, one for the guts, one for the immune system, one for the brain, one for the cells, one for the guts, one for the immune system, one for the brain, the Mediterranean diet in a bottle, the xenobiotic of 8 different fibers, 3 different fiber lengths to feed the bugs through the entire GI tract, to help shift the balance from proteolytic to saccharolytic bacteria, to lower the gram-negative bacteria in the gut. This also helps to increase the secondary bioavailability of the omega-3. So the omega-3 is a prebiotic. The polyphenols are prebiotics. Combined with the prebiotic fiber, dramatically improves the bioavailability and the uptake of the omega-3. The Extend is Zinzino's response to pill fatigue. Too many pills, too many bottles in the cabinet. It combines the essential vitamins, the minerals in their most bioavailable form, and the phytonutrients, carotenoids like lutein and zeaxanthin, broccoli extract, CoQ10, seaweed extract. It's brilliant. And Zinzino has also argued that when it comes to the body's natural conversion of green leafy vegetables into longer chain omega-3, you need the right micronutrients in the right amounts. So these are micronutrients in micronutrient amounts that are very similar to eating food. And then finally, the Viva is a nootropic for the brain that's backed by 9 randomized control trials. Saffron is one of the oldest natural medicines of all time, going back to antiquity. But the company that we work with, and we have the exclusivity on this ingredient in the network marketing space. This is the same ingredient that Dr. Daniel Amen, the big brain doctor, that he uses. So when you get stressed out, right, you get the bill from the restaurant with just the prices going up all the time, the overload of how do we deal with everything that's going on in our world. That's what the nootropic is for, to help to support healthy stress response. They've also done studies in menopausal women, and they've also done a randomized control trial on adolescents. So it supports stress response, but not like Valium. It works on the GABA receptor, but it's not a benzodiazepine. It supports the serotonin receptor, but it's not a SSRI. It works on the cannabinoid receptor, but it's not THC. The mechanism of action is incredible. So the combination of these 4 products together, one for the cells, one for the gut, one for the immune system, one for the brain, look at these results. 120 days later, going from 23 to 1, omega-6 to omega-3, totally out of balance, into a perfect score of 1.8 to 1. And what's so beautiful here is all of the other indices have gotten back into balance. The omega-3 index, the mental strength balance, the cell membrane fluidity, and arachidonic acid, which we'll talk about right here at the end. So I wanted to also address a controversy that's going on. There has been some chatter in the internet that as powerful as omega-3 is and as helpful as it could be, watch out, it could increase arrhythmia. In the biggest trial that was ever conducted, called the Reduce It trial, at 4,000 milligrams of omega-3, that's a big dose, there was about a 2% increase in atrial fibrillation, but there was a reduction in stroke or death. And so the media just didn't really report the full story. Here's a 2025 January 13th paper. I think that'll be about as current as we could possibly get. The impact of omega-3 supplementation on arrhythmia reduction in acute coronary syndrome patients, a randomized controlled trial. So hopefully this will end this debate. This study highlights the potential of omega-3 fatty acids as adjunctive therapy for arrhythmia management. I also point out that all of the fish eaters that have been out there, that the evidence, the epidemiological evidence of eating fish helps to reduce atrial fibrillation. So it may be that when you take a mega dose of purified fish oil without the polyphenols, that have all the antioxidants stripped out, that could be a potential issue, but no problem with what our product is. So on the home stretch, I want to share the latest thinking on the mechanism of action. How is this doing everything? It's so multifaceted. There's so many different benefits to getting back into balance. So here we're looking at the European Heart Journal. This came out in November of last year, and the title of the article is EPA arachidonic acid. So eicosapentaenoic acid is EPA, arachidonic acid AA. That's what we measure on the omega-6-3 balance. We're measuring the balance between arachidonic acid omega-6 and EPA eicosapentaenoic acid omega-3. It says EPA and AA and triglyceride levels mediate most of the benefits of omega-3 and Reduce It. Reduce It was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, multi-centered, 8,000 person trial that showed a 25% reduction in major adverse coronary events on top of standard of care. So now we've gone from folk medicine, from nutrition, to like big time intervention and protection for the entire world. So just a couple of weeks ago, they showed the sub-analysis, which I will conclude on, but I just want to paint the picture so that everybody can see why this number is so important. On the right-hand side of the slide, you see the omega-6 family. On the left-hand side, you see the omega-3 family. So the first omega-3, ALA, this is the one that comes from green leafy vegetables or flax meal. And the omega-3 LA, linoleic acid, that's the one that comes from seeds and nuts and seed oils. And I think what people need to appreciate is omega-3 and omega-6, they compete. They compete for conversion and placement. So omega-3 in the body is converted into arachidonic acid. Omega-3 ALA is converted into EPA. These are the two things we're measuring here on the balance score. And if you look at the top of the slide, I know it's a little faint, but you see this pink color here, more inflammatory. So these are the more inflammatory, these are eicosanoids, hormone-like compounds. They sort of direct cellular traffic versus EPA that produce the less inflammatory signals. So we're measuring a proxy for systemic inflammation. This is a measurement of what's going on in the cell membrane. The tissue is the issue, and it is a proxy for cellular inflammation. So a couple of weeks ago, when they showed their poster session for the paper I showed earlier, EPA and arachidonic acid and triglyceride levels mediate most of the benefits of omega-3 in Reduce It. And I highlighted this for this talk. It says EPA to be the strongest single mediator. This is a 25% reduction in major adverse coronary events. And what was the mechanism of action? EPA to be the strongest single mediator, EPA and AA and triglycerides jointly mediated 78.9% of the effect. So what we're saying here is on the bleeding edge of nutrition and medicine, the biggest trial that's ever done that showed a 25% reduction in death, the way that it worked was lowering omega-6 AA and increasing omega-3 EPA. That is exactly what Zinzino is doing. And this should be very, very exciting to practitioners that are on this call, doctors that are on this call, to give you all of the validation that you need, that this is the biggest breakthrough that we've had in preventative care since the introduction of statins. And it could be argued even bigger. So when you see your before and after scores, here are my before and after scores, 13-1 to 3.8-1. And I'm not going to stop. The measurement that we measure is exactly what has been called out as the mechanism of action in the biggest trial ever conducted on the subject. So thank you very much for letting me share with your group tonight.